Greetings everyone, we hope you're keeping safe wherever you may be. I'm Cap Maceda Aguila of ZigWheels Philippines, and today I'd like to welcome you to another edition of what we'd like to call ZigWheels One-on-One, where we feature executives of car companies for some meaningful discussion about the brands they represent and the auto industry in general. The Volkswagen Group, with a myriad of brands under its wing, is undoubtedly the world's largest automaker. It has also quite a bit of history in the Philippines, with vehicles such as, of course, the Beetle and Combi, etched in our tale of mobility. In 2013, the Ayala Group-led Automobile Central Enterprise Incorporated was appointed as the country's sole VW importer. And since then, it has presided over the growth of the German automotive brand. Today, Volkswagen has 8 dealerships here, and fairly recently, it brought in 2 models, the T-Cross SUV, and yes, the comebacking Multivan Combi. Now let's learn more about how the company is doing today and what the future holds from none other than its leader. We're privileged to have with us today Mr. Felipe Estrella, President of Volkswagen Philippines.
Okay, everyone. Thank you very much again for joining us. And we'd like to thank first, of course, our guest for today, Volkswagen Philippines, Felipe Estrella. Sir, thank you very much for making time to join us today for a quick chat.
Thanks very much, Cap. Very happy to be here and nice to see you again after quite a bit of time. I hope all is good and well on your end.
Yes, thank you. I mentioned during my introduction, Volkswagen has been a little busy these days. I mean, Volkswagen Philippines. I mean, most notably with the launch of 2 important models for you. But we'll get to that later. I want to get a sense first of how you see the industry and how it's shaping up this year. Of course, things are very fluid. As we record this, we've just learned that we will go on MECQ tomorrow. But overall, how do you see the auto industry? Because last year, I know that both Campi and Avid had expressed sort of hope that this will be a recovery year, so-called recovery year for the industry. How are you seeing it from your end?
Yeah, I think you're right, no, Cap. It continues to be a challenging environment. I think for our country and for the world, right? On not just from a business perspective, but even from a personal perspective. The fact that both you and I are talking to each other on a Zoom screen from home really says how much things have changed, no? And how much things continue to remain to be the way they are. As an industry, I think the domestic automotive industry is one of the more exposed industries to the current environment. And at the beginning of the year, there was the added element of the safeguard measures being introduced, right? And of course, there had to be a process that the government would undertake to properly vet and study the issue presented. And of course, we're happy to note that the decision of the government, obviously, not to continue with the safeguard duties, will certainly be, I think, a positive, primarily, I think, for consumers. And then second, and then of course, we as an industry will benefit from that because obviously it reduces the cost to own for consumers, no? And that should help, I think. Overall, compared to last year, I think we are seeing a bit of a recovery in terms of sales volumes for the industry in general. Last year, I guess, being the first year of the pandemic and, obviously so much unknown at the time, was really a difficult year for many industries. And I think with having a year under our belt of experience, we've been able to adjust. And also, I guess it's partly a recognition that we have to find a way to cope, I guess, with the current realities. No? And I think the industry has shown that it has adapted. And so we are seeing um, improvement compared to last year. Having said that, we do, as you know, right? I mean, you just referenced it. We've already had 2 ECQs happen this year because of the spikes that occurred, right? And so, whenever this happens, obviously our dealerships are not able to operate from a sales perspective, and that obviously also has a material impact on the on customers' abilities to transact with us during that particular point in time. So we adjust, we adapt, and fortunately, the measures that we've taken these past 18 or so months seem to be helping naman cushion the effects and at least set us up for some recovery.
Mhm. Now, for Volkswagen Philippines in particular, how are you guys doing in terms of sales? We've had, well, recently the numbers from Avid and Campi TMA have come in, and at least for the first 7 months of the year, I mean, things are looking good. Of course, we reference, of course, we compare that to last year, which was just a disaster. But at least as far as your projections, I mean, VW's projections for 2021, how is it shaping up, and how are you looking, or how are you seeing the rest of the year pan out for you guys?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think last year was definitely a low point for the many factors that we already discussed, and we are definitely seeing improvement this year. I think we're close to already approaching our full year number for last year. Certainly, we anticipate that we will overtake that number before the end of the year. And that means that we will be able to show a growth over last year as a brand. We are further, of course, encouraged, and a lot of our optimism for the second half of this year. And this was, of course, before we had the recent spike happen. No? But we were certainly optimistic about the second half of the year because we were rolling into the second half of the year with the recently launched TCross. And then, of course, a few months later, we launched the Multivan Combi. We think that now that we're transitioning into MECQ, people may have a little bit more of an ability to move around. And on the assumption that the balance of the year will be, some around that set of, I guess, parameters or constraints, then we think that the second half will help us get to our goal of doing much better than last year. And as I said, the trend seems to be pointing in that direction also. So we're very encouraged. We're very happy about it, obviously, and we continue to work to try and improve and capitalize on this momentum.
Okay. Now, speaking of momentum, of course, a lot of attention has gone to you guys because of course, the significant releases that you've had for the year, namely the TCross and, as you mentioned, the Multivan Combi. How has the reception been from the market? How are Filipinos reacting to these two new products from you guys?
Very positive, actually, Cap. Both the two products are in very different segments with very different sizes as well. But in both segments, we've received very positive feedback. Obviously, this was all again before we had to go into lockdown and stay home. No, so when people were able to move, certainly there were a lot of people coming to the showroom, checking out the cars and making their reservations and preparing to take delivery of their vehicles. We anticipate that once we're able to get back to some level of activity on the sales side in our dealerships, then that momentum will come back. So in the TCross, as I said, very well received, both from interested customers and customers who have managed to already take delivery of the vehicle. So we're very encouraged. It's a product that is in a very fast-growing segment, as I'm sure you know, and it looks like the customers who are shopping in that segment and in that price point, this is one of those products that ticks a lot of the boxes for them, and so it's in their consideration basket. We're very happy about that, and I think we've put forward a pretty decent and good, if I may say so myself, value proposition for the TCross that customers really can appreciate it, and and hopefully it makes their buying decision a little harder because it now adds another choice that they have to choose from, diba? The Multivan Combi is in a much smaller segment. It's in the premium, executive, and family van segment, which is a much smaller part of our automotive industry. But nonetheless, I think we've been able to identify this particular product that will have a distinct appeal to customers shopping there.
Mhm. Now, as you correctly mentioned, the Multivan Combi is in a totally different market. But I'll go to the T-Cross first. No, I think you're right in saying that. Actually, even us in the media were pretty surprised by the pricing and the kit that went with the variants of the T-Cross. So I think it's safe to say, I mean, from my perspective at least, you won't have any problem moving that. However, there were some questions also from local media and probably even fans of Volkswagen that you only chose to bring in the top variant or more expensive variant of the Multivan Combi. Can you walk us through? I know you already said also that you see a demand in this segment, this price point, but can you also walk us through? Probably is there a decision forthcoming, probably in the near future, that you might be bringing in the more affordable variants of the Multivan Combi? Or I mean, yeah, please tell us about that.
Yeah. So you're right. There are a couple of other variants of the Multivan Combi available. There's the Transporter, which is a utility van for the most part, no? And then the California, which naman is a specific use type van for it has camping features and all that. And then there's of course the Caravelle, which is more of a people mover type thing, no? The Multivan Combi is we thought one of those products that, as I said, would have the right set of features, characteristics, and qualities. Plus, it has a diesel engine, which is very popular here in the Philippines, for this identified segment. I think bringing in the other variants of the Combi is certainly part of the assessment that we're making as Volkswagen Philippines. And if we think that it will have a place in our local market, then we can consider bringing it in, or we will consider bringing it in, certainly. But if you take the Transporter, for example, as a utility van, there are a lot of utility vans out there, I think, that would compete very aggressively with a Transporter that's brought in because of a variety of things, right? Including the accompanying friction costs that would inherently be part of the equation. So if in our assessment a particular product will not be able to afford our customers something attractive and compelling, then we tend to shy away from bringing those products in because it's a tougher sell, and of course we understand that our customers are knowledgeable and are of course looking for something where they get their money's worth. So it's all these things that play into that sort of a decision.
Okay, fair enough. Now, as you correctly mentioned earlier, a lot of perhaps performance this year, I mean, industry performance this year will depend or it will hinge on the pandemic restrictions and quarantine restrictions that we have. Now, I know that a lot of the companies, not just in automotive, but in other industries as well, they've pivoted to digital, to sort of not to skirt or maybe to get ahead of the virus, but more of as it was a sort of like an acceleration to what was inevitable actually in quite a number of areas. Now, can you share with us with VW Philippines what have you guys done to not really maybe to pivot, but to evolve the business and to realize revenues and sales where of course like if dealerships, as you mentioned, continue to be shuttered, knock on wood, then like just walk me through that whole digital experience for Volkswagen in the Philippines.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. And I think the word that I would also use is adapt. We see all across the world things were already changing even before the pandemic hit, right? The mega trends that people had been talking about on the mobility space in terms of alternate sources of drivetrains, for example, and then connectivity and all these things, right? I think the pandemic obviously affected those mega trends, and I think will somehow cause those mega trends to also adjust, right? But I think the world was already evolving, and the pandemic happening just adds another piece to the equation to evolve around, right? And in our case as Volkswagen Philippines, we've actually embraced the resultant constraints that have emerged over the past 18 months. And part of this, as you correctly mentioned, is more focus, perhaps more emphasis on developing the digital aspect of our business, right? So, Franz and Timmy, they've worked very hard on developing our digital presence in order to be able to reach out and communicate with our customers the different things that we're doing in Volkswagen Philippines and the different products that we have available for our customers. We also work in partnership with our dealers, of course, because they're really the primary touch point with our customers. We've also tried to establish more digital channels where customers can interact with our dealers, right? So through websites, of course, the traditional voice through telephone and mobile phone is also there. And our dealers have adopted, right? So they engage with customers no longer primarily just in the showroom. They do it by phone. They do it on the web, right? They do it through other channels such as ZigWheels, right? Where customers also come in contact with us through your platform. And I think this is all part of the broadening of the engagement with customers moving forward. Even in terms of purchases, right? In the olden days, you would go to the dealership to pick up your brand new car, right? Now more and more people, because they're concerned about safety and moving around, they request us to make deliveries of their new vehicles, and we do that, right? Our dealers do that. Our dealers go to where the customer is rather than asking the customer to come to us. Medyo these past 2 weeks lang, we couldn't go to the customer as much kasi restricted yung movement. But ano na yun, standard na yun. And even on our service side, we continue to study ways to make service more accessible to our customers, including potentially, for certain types of service needs, if we can do it on site, perhaps at the customer's office or at the customer's home. We're doing that to some degree, but we'd like to do more of it. And also parang establish the whole concept of mobile service as well. So
Okay.
these are some of the things that we've already done and started to do, but we anticipate that moving forward we will continue to try and innovate and introduce so that we can adapt to the times.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now you mentioned dealerships. Volkswagen Philippines has 8 dealerships at the moment, right?
Mhm.
What has this, well, not so new normal anymore? What has this done in terms of how the company views dealerships? Because of course, traditionally, more dealerships mean like good news, right?
Yes, of
But
course.
now you correctly mentioned how aside from transitioning to digital in more ways, um, does this new normal still have room for physical facilities, brick and mortar dealerships you have out there, or how is Volkswagen Philippines approaching this this topic?
I'd like to think so. I think at the end of the day, we're all humans, and we still, while Zoom and e-communication is great, I think there is still an element of human interaction that is necessary, and I think healthy. It's part of our beings, right? And so, I think that the brick and mortar dealership will still be there, but I think the brick and mortar dealership will also need to evolve, right? I mean, my sense is that, especially with how uh, populations and urban centers are evolving, um, that dealerships will probably need to evolve accordingly, maybe into sort of smaller spaces that are very, I think, also that will have a lot of digital elements to it, so that information, which is obviously becoming increasingly important in the modern day, right? We digest and we access information at rates that have never been seen before, and so even automotive customers, whether they're on the service side or especially on the sales side, are also trying to um, process and source all this information. So, I think even as the physical space might evolve and change into more, into maybe perhaps smaller but more efficient type setups and uses, we will find that within these spaces, the customers need for information, and the customers perhaps requirements to be able to get answers to their questions and that sort of thing will still continue to be met, right? But just in new and perhaps more innovative ways. And I think this migration to that sort of new model will also help on the business side, right? Because obviously, a more efficient use of capital is also a more productive use of capital. And therefore, when you're able to um, uh, achieve this kind of productivity, then that is sort of what fuels growth and development for a particular industry or for a particular economy.
Mhm. So would it be correct to say that maybe the term that we should use is not having not more dealerships per se, but perhaps having more evolved dealerships, like that probably the typical dealerships of the past are slowly becoming irrelevant, particularly in light of the pandemic.
Yeah. I don't think naman siguro irrelevant. They will definitely continue to be relevant, but they will adapt and they will change, right? And even for us at Volkswagen, right? You mentioned that we have 8 dealerships right now. We're not going to stop at 8, right? We will continue to try at least to have some presence and representation in certain key geographical areas. It's just a little bit more difficult to do that now with the pandemic as a backdrop. No? So we're being more thoughtful about that, and we're working with our dealer partners as well. But we haven't stopped in terms of planning and strategizing for the future and identifying where are the certain geographical areas that we think we would eventually need to be in order to bring our products closer to our customers. But when we do enter those markets, we will probably show up with a different look, right? And maybe a slightly different format compared to um, what's been typically seen in the past.
Mhm, mhm. Now, one of the significant things about your new releases this year is that these are global nameplates, global models, the TCross, and of course the Combi. Who doesn't know the Combi, right? Now, um, my question would be, how are you evolving the portfolio, the local portfolio of Volkswagen here? Because I'm sort of seeing a pattern that we see some models that perhaps aren't there anymore, and then of course we welcome the new ones. How are you approaching this evolution of Volkswagen Philippines the portfolio?
Yeah. Well, again, Cap, first and foremost, consideration for us is the customer, right? What is the customer looking for? What is the customer want or need, right? And of course, what is the customer willing to, how much is the customer willing to invest in order to meet, what he's looking for? And as as we keep these things in mind, right? In the specific example of the T-Cross, we saw that there was a segment of the automotive market that was developing at a certain price point, right? Customers were opting to transition from perhaps the traditional sedan format or maybe even the large SUV format and moving a little bit towards a more compact SUV, subcompact SUV format, and then at a certain price point pa. And then I think what the pandemic also did was that a lot of the talk pre-pandemic was about shared mobility, right? Taking advantage of the ability of one asset to service multiple users, right? But obviously, the pandemic introduced now a consideration about safety and perhaps related to that, contact tracing and things like that, diba? So people were opting perhaps to forego the shared mobility concept, instead make an investment in buying a car, right? But obviously, if they're going to make that investment, then it's for a need, and therefore they have very practical considerations. So they're shopping at price points which, as we noted, was like in the slightly above 1 million, definitely in the sub 1 million range, right? There's a lot of growth in those segments there. So seeing that that's what customers are doing, and what kind of product they're looking for at that in that space, we were able to identify that the T-Cross in particular would be an ideal product to offer to customers there. And so, as I said, that's the foremost consideration for us as to whether we can bring something that people will will bring value to the customer, right? And we've also recognized and noted that obviously there are nameplates that are more perhaps known among customers, and obviously a known nameplate is easier for people to identify with than something that's unknown, right? Because then you have to make the effort to introduce something unknown to a customer. And so that's why, as you've seen this year, we've chosen to bring in more known nameplates, as you mentioned. And we think that this will also help. it I think this is really more of from a marketing standpoint and an awareness standpoint, because from a product standpoint, Volkswagen being the global company that it is, there's no material difference in terms of, sometimes people like to ask us, where is this product sourced, where was it manufactured, right? And we always try to tell our customers, Volkswagen is Volkswagen all across the world. It's just that they're so big that they have so many manufacturing sites. And from a logistical standpoint, it does make sense to produce closer to your customers, right? And therefore, you have manufacturing plants all over the place. And in our case, there are benefits to sourcing products depending on their availability, right? Because not every product is built in every plant. But we source products from the plants that make sense, right? It can make sense from a distance standpoint. It can make sense from a shall we say international trade standpoint, if there are certain benefits in that regard. And then it can also make sense related to distance, right? In terms of lead time, right? If I'm gonna ship a car, for example, in from South America, right? I mean, it's going to take a long time before that car gets here because it has to traverse the oceans to get to the Philippines. As we know, right? Taking a flight from the Philippines into South America, I think that's probably one of the longest flights an individual could possibly take. But then if there's a source, for example, like in Singapore, then it's a lot faster to get the product to the Philippines. So all these things again come together in terms of the types of products that we bring in. Sorry, the specific products that we bring in to our market. And we're glad that in the case of the TCross, for example, we're able to we have a supply point that's very nearby and allows us to bring in the TCross and offer it to our customers at very attractive prices, with still all the whole feature suite available to customers. In the case of the Combi naman, it's not as widely produced in multiple sites, and therefore we necessarily have to take it from the manufacturing plants in Europe, and there are obviously implications associated with that. But the good thing is that because of the type of product it is and the characteristics that it offers, then at the price point that it will land here, it has a certain appeal to the segment that we're trying to reach. I don't know if you realize, but the Combi, if you compare it to its I guess peer group vans, premium vans segment, is actually very, very competitively priced. So you get a lot of these premium features, and when you take a look at the SRP, I dare say that the SRP, I think, is lower than most of the options available in that segment. So it's certainly something that I would think, if you're in the market for a van and a premium one at that, a customer should definitely consider it.
Now, I make reference to what you said earlier, that Volkswagen Philippines will, of course, take a look at what customers want, and justifiably so. I mean, like in the case of the TCross, I think it's a very good idea for you guys to be there in that segment because it's a growth area. Now, but having said that, Volkswagen, of course, is just an iconic brand, and you have a lot of iconic models and nameplates over the years, over the decades. And I've seen how, having covered the Volkswagen Philippines from its inception in 2013, I've seen how you guys have evolved the portfolio. And I'm sorry to keep harping on this, but I know that you've answered this very nicely before, and that's why I want to ask you this again now, because I think you just had a spot-on answer for it. Of course, you will have new fans of Volkswagen Philippines. Of Volkswagen, you will have new fans who love your products, probably don't have an awareness of the history of the brand, but they know Volkswagen, and what it stands for. On the other hand, you have these let's just call them more seasoned fans that remember the Jettas, the Polos, the Golfs, and what does the future hold for these people? I mean, are they because I know that quite a lot of them still want to have those brands that, as you mentioned before, the brand may be more known for these models compared to, say, a Santana, which probably will be okay now for a segment also. But you have this. I guess it's not a curse, but you have this aspect of the brand wherein because of the very rich history that it has, right?
Yes.
And you have a lot of iconic, let's just call it iconic models over the years and over the decades. Now I referenced that to what you said, that you guys want to, of course, the customers what they want. Now how does Volkswagen Philippines then see its demographic? Where are you guys at? Who is the Volkswagen customer? What is probably, I don't know if this makes a sense, but what's the price point that you guys want to be known for, or the sweet spot that you guys want to be known for? Given all of these things, the new models, the old models, everything in between.
Yeah. Thanks, Cap. No? I think you're absolutely right. Volkswagen is one of those unique, long-standing global brands that really has, particularly in auto, I think has a very interesting following amongst Filipino auto enthusiasts in particular. Considering that between the 1980s to the 2010s, right? Our brand has been pretty much absent from the country, and yet people remember Volkswagen, which I think is a testament to the brand itself. And of course, we love the fact that we have such passionate fans and owners, right? Current as well as past owners of Volkswagen vehicles. I will say that the process, I guess, if I'll call it that, of determining what products make it to our shores is the product of a lot of collaboration. So it's not something that we as Volkswagen Philippines can unilaterally decide on. We have to work very closely with Volkswagen Global and of course any other Volkswagen groups that may be involved in the whole process of bringing a product into the market, right? And I can say that even globally, Volkswagen itself is evolving, right? So and they've had their own set of successes and challenges and strategy shifts. And I think we've already mentioned that expect that Volkswagen globally will evolve even more moving forward. So what does this mean? We do recognize that a lot of customers do mention that they would like to see some of even the other nameplates come back into the market, right? And obviously this is, on a practical basis, we would welcome customers reaching out to us and letting us know, because with that information, we can go back to our partners and say, hey, look, we have customers here who are looking for this particular type of vehicle. Can we bring it in, right? And if our partner says yes, then by all means, we would certainly like to make those customers happy. So that's on a very, very I guess specific example, we can do that, right? In terms of actual other products that may come into the market, that is a continuing discussion that we have with our partners, and while I cannot make any disclosures at this point in time, certainly we will continue to look at what specific nameplates we can bring moving forward, whether they are newer nameplates or whether they are the old familiar nameplates, right? As long as we can get them here so that it will deliver, again, the value proposition to customers, then we can do that. And of course, with the agreement and with the support of our partners globally. I think also, as a last food for thought, especially for our fans out there. As I said, Volkswagen is evolving, and you're already seeing it, right? The Beetle, which is the most iconic of Volkswagen models, right? I mean, if you think Beetle, there are two names that. I'm sorry, if you think Volkswagen, there's usually the Beetle is one of those names that immediately pops up next to that word, right? And yet, globally, Volkswagen has decided to sunset the Beetle, right? They have their reasons for it, and I'm sure in the years to come, it will become clearer as to why they made that decision, right? But that is, I think, part and parcel of the development journey of Volkswagen that we here in the Philippines should not be surprised when it happens and when certain products stop or are not available to our market, because it also signals a brighter, a certain type of future ahead, right? The death, sorry, I don't want to say death, but the Beetle not being available is not the end of it, right? Because the Beetle not being available opens the door for the range of electric vehicles to eventually find their way. And this is, we know that this is a trend that's going to happen in the future. It's an exciting portfolio of electric vehicles that Volkswagen is developing, right? And we can expect that at some point in the future, we will as well make that transition. So while we may not be thrilled perhaps about the Beetle no longer being there, we can also look forward and be excited about the ID3 and the ID4 or the ID Buzz eventually making it to the Philippines. So, it's the story and it's the reality, right?
Yes, that's right. Very good points. Now, maybe as a final note, is there something you can disclose to our audience out there, to your fans? What's next? At least for the year, are you done launching for the year? Are there more to come at least before year's end?
Yeah, I think we mentioned previously. This was of course all before we had two ECQs happen. We were looking to potentially launch still one more product this year, no? But there are externalities that unfortunately we're dealing with, and in particular Volkswagen Global is dealing with. I think people are aware of the pandemic, of course, but there's also the chip shortage that's going on globally that's affecting not only cars but all sorts of electronic devices, and this has had an impact on production and delivery lead times. So I can say that we are still working on that plan. The timelines are not yet firm at this point, no? So I would leave it at I'm hopeful that in a best case scenario, we may be able to bring yet another model into the market by the end of the year. But if that doesn't happen, then we're really looking at something next year. So we definitely have another model due to hit our shores in the near future. But right now, the estimated time for that is still quite wide a range. So it's hard to pin down and share specific information on that. But we will, once we have more clarity and once we have more certainty, then we of course will let everyone know, including yourself.
All right. Thank you very much. Now, on that note, I'd like to thank you again for appearing on ZigWheels One-on-One. There you have it, folks. That's Mr. Felipe Estrella, President of Volkswagen Philippines. And again, for ZigWheels Philippines, it's been Cap Maceda Aguila, and we'll see you guys soon.